When Michelle Visage argued that queens should cinch their waist, this is what she meant.
Sister, I'm pickled.
Hello everyone, my name is Roberto Sanchez Vilella con un nombre extremadamente larguísimo, but you may call me Robbie for short. And today, I want to talk about Mega Evolutions, learn more about Mega Victreebel, and ultimately discuss how Pokemon designs have been better reflecting its diverse audience. We know that Victreebel is based on carnivorous pitcher plants, and these plants secrete a nectar that attracts bugs for them to subsequently feast upon, which is why we see Mega Victreebel chasing after bug-type Pokemon in its gameplay reveal trailer. We also saw a couple of Scatterbug from the other trailer licking the sweet nectar on the floor of the abandoned building.
Refreshing.
Mega Victreebel, on the other hand, seems to be inspired by the Nepenthes loei specifically, a tropical genus of the pitcher plant with a more distorted appearance. Notice the hourglass shape that more closely resembles the way Mega Victreebel's vine is constricting its mouth. Its design even exaggerates the leaf that the pitcher plant uses as a lid. There's already so much fan art of this Pokemon, even the memes are top-notch and hilarious. Here's a little showcase of some of my favorites. You found a bomb bag. First season of Drag Race versus All-Stars. He's so citrus berry shaped, I'm crying. Mega Victreebel is the hot girl tummy issues Pokemon. She has acid reflux. There's a sense of relatability that people have resonated with, myself included, because I also struggle with silent reflux, and that's really not fun when it combines with your allergies.
My tummy hurt.
Notice also how I've been referring to Mega Victreebel as she this whole video, because the girls and the gays have quickly adopted her into girly pop territory. However, while the new Mega Evolutions have been exciting, not everyone online is happy with these designs. It's as if we're experiencing a similar reaction to the Generation 5 games, which were meant to be a sort of reset for the franchise that emulated the tropes of the first generation. That's why Black and White specifically featured a completely new regional Pokédex with 156 new species, but you could only obtain previous generation Pokemon in the post-game, which many people didn't enjoy. It's human nature for us to fear change, even though it's the most natural thing in nature, and Generation 5 had the most changes going from the previous generation to this one. It was the first generation to not feature a world based on a region of Japan, the first generation to have sequels rather than a third version or games that revisited a previous region, and the first and only generation that features a story that questioned the morality of Pokemon battles and their domestication.
I'm sure most of you believe that we humans on Pokemon are partners. However, is that really the truth? I read on WikiHow that the Earth might be flat. Have you ever considered that?
Players also didn't like that they couldn't build teams with the Pokemon they already knew about, and there's such a huge focus on the new designs that many people trashed them consistently. Garbodor, Chandelure, and Vanilluxe were examples of object-like Pokemon that were often the target of the ever-unsubstantiated lazy design critique. It's the reason why, to this day, most of the Pokemon that appear on least favorite Pokemon lists are from Generation 5. In the hopes of reheating their nachos, Black and White was met with much criticism from fans, and you can see that reflected in the game's sales. Black and White have the least amount of sales out of every game that starts a new generation of Pokemon. These games weren't a total failure, of course, but they were often considered the black sheep of the mainline franchise. Later, Game Freak course-corrected in the sequel games, adding many Pokemon from previous generations to the wild area and a bunch new small routes to deviate a little bit from the main path, but like myself, many Pokemon fans didn't play Black 2 and White 2. Again, look at the sales for those games and you'll see that they are fourth from the bottom out of every mainline Pokemon game. Many folks will tell you that it's the most complete 2D Pokemon experience you will ever have, but at the time, the reputation for this generation was set. Generation 6 was another opportunity for them to reset the franchise, just like they hoped for in the previous generation. X and Y would be their first mainline Pokemon game launched in the 3D space, so they really needed to make an impact as they entered this new era. Thus, in June of 2013 came the addition of the Fairy type, which introduced an archetype of Pokemon that was meant to disrupt the status quo by being super effective against the Dragon type Pokemon that dominated the competitive scene.
Which is like so apt. Like, queerness comes and disrupts the people at the top, the strongest, and is super effective against the most overpowered, that being Dragon.
It also recontextualized older Pokemon that were very clearly feminine coded by either changing their typing from normal to fairy or simply adding the fairy type on top of an already existing type. Clefairy is the most obvious example since the word fairy is in its name, but it felt like a sort of coming out for this Pokemon, metaphorically speaking. The normal type is typically given to Pokemon that don't quite have a clear elemental affinity, or that simply don't belong in any other type category. This new type was a very important factor in diversifying the audience because fairy type Pokemon have become a representation of queerness and femininity, a metaphor for disrupting the most powerful people in society simply by existing. However, they still needed to return to form after the critiques they received in the last generation, and appeal to their main fanbase, and Mega Evolution was their way of doing that. Mega Evolutions are highly regarded as the best gimmick that Pokemon has introduced, but I think that a better word to use here is exciting, because terrestrialization is actually, objectively, the best gimmick in competitive battles. It's the most balanced stratagem because all you're doing is changing a Pokemon's type to act in an offensive or defensive way, depending on the context of the battle you're participating in. Mega Evolutions, I would argue, are the least balanced, especially considering how every pseudo-legendary Pokemon from the first 4 generations, as of right now, has a confirmed Mega Evolution. Many would argue that Mega Evolution should have been reserved for Pokemon that have less usage in the competitive scene, but the actual purpose of Mega Evolutions was to give powerful new forms to already beloved Pokemon. Alongside the regional forms and convergent species that have come out since the Alola era, these designs breathed new life into the almost 30-year-old designs from the Kanto region. After all, Kanto-based Mega Evolutions at the time made up about 43% of the original 28 Mega Evolutions introduced in X and Y. As of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which heavily skewed that statistic in favor of Hoenn Pokemon, Kanto Megas now make up about 32% of the 48 available Mega Evolutions, but that seems to be changing back with the introduction of Mega Dragonite and Mega Victreebel. In this section, I want to test this theory that I've seen floating around the internet about how every Mega Evolution is either X-shaped or Y-shaped. But I also think it's a great opportunity to revisit every design so that you can see the difference between the sharp, edgy, cool-looking designs that were predominant during the 3DS era versus the softer, goofier, more conceptual models that we've been getting in the Switch era. Looking at the list of Mega Evolutions as a whole, I can see how the theory comes into play. Think about the balance in how their designs change from their regular form to their Mega Evolution. It's not about whether they are literally shaped like the letter Y or the letter X, like Yveltal and Xerneas, but rather what features are being heightened and exaggerated by their Mega Evolutions. Take Mega Dragonite, for example, whose exaggerated features are the newly grown wings on its head, and its now massive beaded tail. Mega Dragonite itself is not shaped like the letter Y, but the design elements that were added to its Mega Evolution are balanced in a way that resembles the shape of the letter Y. That being said, Mega Venusaur is X, as its leaves are spread out to make it look like a jungle, and it covers its entire body. Mega Charizard X and Y are X and Y respectively. Mega Charizard X has a completely new color palette, some horned details on its shoulders, the wings are spiked, its hind claws are spread apart, and there are flames coming out from the sides of its mouth. Mega Charizard Y, on the other hand, keeps the color scheme of the original design, but the Mega Evolution has a focus on the bigger wings and the spiked details on the tails. Essentially, Mega Charizard X represents X because its entire design has been overhauled from the intimidating orange flying lizard to a more edgy dark dragon, whereas Mega Charizard Y maintains the same color scheme with the noticeable details forming a Y shape. Mega Blastoise is Y-shaped because the focus is on the 3 cannons and a Y has 3 lines. Mega Beedrill could go either way, but I would argue Y because the wings are dramatically different and the various needles form one giant needle. Mega Pidgeot is Y for the obvious enhancements to its feathers. Mega Alakazam is Y, but the Y is upside down because the main changes come from its mustache and pointed head. The spoons are not part of its body. Mega Slowbro is actually Y-shaped. Mega Gengar is actually X-shaped. Mega Kangaskhan is just Kangaskhan with a child, so I'm gonna say X because it's spawning a whole new creature. Mega Pinsir is X because of the spiked horns and giant wings inside of its carapace. Mega Gyarados is Y. Duh. Mega Aerodactyl is also Y, even its head is Y-shaped. Mega Mewtwo X and Y follow the same design principle as Mega Charizard. The tail shrinks in its X form while its tail grows in its Y form. Mega Ampharos is Y because the focus is on the larger horns and hair coming from her head and the fluffy tail, while the rest of its body stays relatively the same as regular Ampharos. Mega Steelix is obviously Y for the same reason as Mega Gyarados, if not Y-shaped, Y-snake. Mega Scizor is clearly X-shaped. Mega Heracross was difficult upon comparison with its original design. I'm inclined to say X-shaped because its entire body bulks up, but the X is flipped 45 degrees. Mega Houndoom is X because of the shape of the longer horns and bone-like structure around its neck. Mega Tyranitar is X as well, as the body transforms entirely with the back sprites forming an X shape similar to Xerneas. Mega Sceptile is Y because the tail is the main event. Mega Blaziken is also Y, though I could be persuaded in the other direction, but I think its stance surpasses the balance of its design in this regard. Mega Swampert is X, and at this point I want you to notice how most of the X-shaped designs become bulkier. Mega Gardevoir is an upside-down Y since the dress-like body is the main feature. Mega Sableye fits this theory the least, but I would argue Y since the ears become longer and its eyes change color, but the rest of the body is unchanged. Mega Mawile is Y-shaped. Get into those two giant mouths. Mega Aggron is X, similarly to Mega Swampert, again with a bulkier design. Mega Medicham is Y. It has a very heavy focus on the top and the bottom, but not much changes in the middle, plus the similar stance to Mega Blaziken. Mega Manectric is X with its multiple sharp edges. Mega Sharpedo is also X, no matter which angle you look at it from, as it's actually based on a torpedo. Mega Camerupt is the most difficult one, but I'm gonna say an upside down Y. Mega Altaria with its very long tail and Mega Bayonet with the way its zippers open are both Y. Mega Absol is also Y, particularly because of how its wings and the way it stands create that shape. Mega Glalie is actually X-shaped. Mega Salamence is difficult to conclude, but I would argue Y-shaped since the body becomes a straight line and its wings become the main focus. Mega Metagross is also actually X-shaped. Mega Latias and Latios have the same Mega Evolution design, but with different eyes, and they are both Y-shaped because they are more akin to airplanes, which resemble that Y shape. Mega Rayquaza is Y-shaped. Mega Lopunny is X for the longer ears and its legs and the tufts on its forehead. Mega Garchomp, I would actually argue, is Y, as its different features form different Y shapes, but it could go either way. Mega Lucario is X since its body changes entirely, but I could also be persuaded. Mega Abomasnow is actually X-shaped based on how it poses like it's about to charge. Mega Gallade is X, as the cape and its arm blade are the highlighted features. Mega Audino is X for the big ears and the way its fur comes out like a dress. Mega Diancie is an upside down Y shape, as is the way that every dress has ever been made. Nora thinks Mega Hawlucha is X-shaped, but you gotta remember that it's not necessarily about how the Pokemon is posing, but rather how the design is balanced. Mega Hawlucha is very top heavy, which is why I think it's Y, but you let me know what you think. And finally, Mega Victreebel is X because of the newly snatched waist, with even Cecily wondering on Twitter how the people who came up with this theory could keep getting away with this.
Well, yes.
Having explored the designs of every Mega Evolution, I want to draw a comparison from recent trailers to the reveal trailers that came out back in 2013. To create excitement around this new mechanic, Pokemon obviously revealed some of the new designs that would be featured in the games. Among those was Charizard, who was, perhaps unsurprisingly, given 2 Mega Evolutions in X and Y, given its high level of popularity. Alongside Charizard, the Kanto starters were also shown to have Mega Evolutions, though Charizard in particular was the first one to be shown in that trailer. The only other Mega Evolution trailer I could find was this one, which featured reveals for Mega Mewtwo Y and Mega Lucario, 2 other hugely popular Pokemon, with Mewtwo receiving a similar treatment as Charizard, being the only 2 Pokemon to receive 2 Mega Evolutions each. Mega Evolution was largely catered to the majority of Pokemon fans because the company understands Charizard's position within the fandom. That majority demographic consists of male players, which is widely known, but here are 2 different polls to prove my point. One that was conducted on Reddit 3 years ago, and one from Game FAQs from 8 years ago. I also found a case study that explored a 25th anniversary campaign in which Pokemon partnered with Katy Perry, stating that Pokemon has a predominantly male following across platforms within the ages of 20 and 29. Unsurprisingly, I'm part of that demographic of male players who grew up enjoying Pokemon in the early 2000s. But how did Charizard become so important for this marketing strategy? In Puerto Rico, for example, barely anyone had cable, but Pokemon was one of those few shows that we were able to watch in the afternoon right after we got home from school, along with The Simpsons and Dragon Ball Z. That's why many millennial Puerto Ricans are obsessed with Dragon Ball Z, by the way. Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon were the only 2 anime we had access to on local channels before we started getting cable and the internet became widespread. Imagine being 8 years old, watching a young Pokemon trainer about your age go on adventures, win battles, and save other Pokemon with the franchise's mascot and his only fully evolved starter. You're gonna be attached to that imagery for the rest of your life. You watch the show, which prompts you to play the game, which prompts you to choose Charmander because you're a kid and don't necessarily know what the other evolutions look like. So, you might choose Charizard because Ash has a Charizard, and you love Ash, therefore you also likely love Charizard. That's not exactly what happened to me, though Charizard was among the Pokemon that I really used to enjoy. Only now as an adult that I realized that I was very influenced by those early 2000s edgy commercials and gendered marketing towards millennial boys. I recommend watching Cecilily's video titled, "Is the Chikorita Hate Rooted in Misogyny?" She explains this phenomenon of Pokemon and Nintendo's gendered marketing and how it influenced fans of the franchise to view Chikorita as weak or terrible.
But why boys? Like, why are video games targeted at boys specifically? Does that make any sense? According to a nice video I watched by Adam Conover, at the beginning of the 80s with the great video game crash and everything, Nintendo decided that they would stop selling in the technology section of your local Costco and start selling in the toys department instead. Toys are probably the most aggressively gendered section of any store on the planet.
This is not to say that you have to be a boy to like Charizard, or that liking Charizard is a purely male thing, but rather that we should try to understand other Pokemon designs that are more feminine coded, or even goofy looking before casting judgment. The main reason, however, that Charizard was so focused on is because it's part of the first generation of Pokemon. In an interview with Polygon, Junichi Masuda stated that the red and blue starters have always been really important to them. He knew that he wanted to give them Mega Evolutions, so he gave the Pokemon team the direction to design them. It's likely the same reason why the Kanto starters also received Gigantamax forms in Sword and Shield, and they'll continue to receive more of the same treatment in the future for being part of the inaugural generation. Circling back to that case study, it later went on to explain that since Katy Perry's audience is majority female, Pokemon may be looking to close the gap between male and female players. I would argue that this sentiment is still true today. Pokemon continues its efforts to diversify their audience by inviting queer creators like Ollie Dreamer, Glitch City and Pokemon Cast to their events, and recognizing female VGC creators like Diana Mejia as a Pokemon partner for this year's Worlds. In 2021, Pokemon collaborated with Michelle Visage of RuPaul's Drag Race fame to present the winners of the Super Pet contest. And how fitting that she was there to promote Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the games with the most drag-adjacent names in the whole franchise.
You can become a trainer just like me by playing Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl, releasing the 19th of November exclusively on Nintendo Switch.
With all of this in mind, it's likely why that same Mega Evolution trailer also revealed Mega Mawile, Mega Absol, and Mega Ampharos. 3 Pokemon that we can definitely agree were designed with a feminine perspective in mind. Therefore, to an extent, you could say that they succeeded in creating a product that could better represent a wider variety of players through their Pokemon designs while still keeping the majority of their player base content. However, their marketing approach was simple and solely focused on the designs of the Pokemon without giving too much thought to what personality the Pokemon could have. That is why Pokemon's recent marketing strategy has been so fun and masterful in terms of the Mega Evolutions they've released. You could argue that Mega Dragonite was revealed in a similar way than in 2013, by simply showcasing its design in a gameplay trailer, but Dragonite is a very popular Pokemon. We are well aware of its lovable personality from the multiple appearances it's had in various animations. Mega Dragonite was a highly requested Mega Evolution, and it was very controversial with a select minority. Straight bros. Feeling upset because its design wasn't a cool or intimidating looking dragon. Perhaps they were expecting a sharp and edgy design from the likes of Mega Aerodactyl or, well, Mega Charizard, again harkening back to Nintendo's 2000s era of gendered marketing. Instead, we got a Sailor Moon style girly pop dragon whose design circles back to Dragonair in a very clever and memorable way, more akin to the likes of Mega Absol or Mega Ampharos. The giant wings that extend from the top of its head are a very nice addition, and the smaller tuft-like details improve upon its design while still keeping Dragonite looking like Dragonite. The controversy died down after about a week though, as the conversation quickly shifted over to the Pokemon World Championships. There was simply nothing else to talk about other than the same unsubstantiated opinion of new thing bad, old thing good. With Mega Victreebel being revealed most recently, the same kind of new thing bad, old thing good opinion resurfaced. However, where Mega Dragonite was contested, Mega Victreebel has taken the internet by storm. It's an unexpected comeback for a Pokemon that has been relegated to obscurity because Victreebel hasn't received mainstream attention since James had one on his team. Going from announcing a Mega Evolution for a fan favorite Pokemon to an obscure, less talked about one was a very smart way to get the conversation started. They drew us in with documentary style and haunted house like footage that was really fun and very campy, and it showed us a lot more of Victreebel's personality. A week after that, right after I had just finished this script, we saw the reveal of Mega Hawlucha in an exciting wrestling match against Machamp that is very indicative of the over-the-top style from the WWE. Very few folks didn't enjoy it, stating that it's just Hawlucha with a fancy mask, or that it's boring because it's just beefier. And that's fine. Not everyone is going to like it, but the flashiness is the point. Hawlucha is inspired by the Mexican luchador archetype that influenced wrestling media from the 2000s, like Mucha Lucha and Nacho Libre. But the most important character that most people recognize with this Mega Evolution is Rey Mysterio, who comes from the lustrous world of WWE. I never really got into wrestling, but I understood the appeal much later in life after an episode of Smarty Pants on Dropout TV, in which Jessica Ross gives a presentation on how wrestling is just drag for straight people, comparing professional wrestling to RuPaul's Drag Race.
Both wrestling and drag are gender performance.
Yes.
Heightening or subverting the audience expectation of what gender is. In 1993, RuPaul came out with Supermodel, and that's exactly what she was. fashion and beauty with $1 million booty, the perfect 90s woman. At the same time, we're at the height of Hawkamania. He's blonde, tan, a real American, and he'll fight for the rights of every man.
This kind of wrestling isn't real. It's all for show. And the trailer had precisely the kind of audience showboating that wrestlers are known for, with so much camp factor and dramatics to draw in the crowd.
Wrestling has been very often seen as fake. So if you're saying that wrestling and drag are the same thing, do you think that Drag Race is rigged or in any way fake?
They both have built-in storylines where I'm sure those producers also want certain outcomes to happen.
The point of this video, however, was to demonstrate the effort that the Pokémon Company has put in to represent a wider spectrum of Pokémon enjoyers. Mega Dragonite was expected to be this fierce, wyvern-like creature, yet Pokémon stood their ground and gave us a magical dragon with a softer appearance, which the queer community really enjoyed. This person was expecting Mega Hawlucha to turn heel, which in professional wrestling means to go from a heroic to a villainous character. But it didn't, and the Latin community is rejoicing. This sentiment is particularly important to me because Legends ZA is the first Pokemon game with a proper Latin American translation, and you best believe I will be playing and reacting to this game in Latin American Spanish. At first, I wasn't sure about Mega Victreebel because I didn't understand her design, but I grew to like her the more people talked about her, instead of the prehistoric design that was supposedly leaked, which looked closer to a Scarlet version of a Paradox form. We got a quirky and excitable sack of goo who's embarrassed her acid reflux is gonna shoot all over the place. This time around, Game Freak is exploring more conceptual looks rather than simply giving us a design just for the sake of having one. It helps me appreciate Pokemon's current design philosophy, and I would argue that the Kalos era is when they truly started that shift. Legends ZA is revisiting a generation that was meant to explore the relationship and the bonds between humans and Pokemon, so it makes sense that they would want to create Pokemon designs that reflect both different cultures around the world and the sense of humor of the current generation. If you are the kind of person that believes all of these new Mega Evolutions and Pokemon designs look terrible because they used to be better in previous generations, then I urge you to start contextualizing each new Pokemon with today's lens, because Pokemon is not just for millennial straight boys. Pokemon is for everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and as always, I appreciate you being here. Bye!